And one of the secrets I've uncovered is a very simple one. It is do what you say you're gonna do. And that means in working with anybody, it is rare. And I didn't know that was a rare thing, but apparently it is.
I agree. Such a big one. And I think the hard thing about impact as well is that your feedback on whether the hard work you're putting in is super delayed. Like it's 90% hard work, and then all of a sudden it's an overnight success. And I think a key thing there is just what you said is one, sticking true to what you say you're going to do, which to me ties into aligning with who you are and speaking your truth, but acting your truth and all those things. And I think if you're able to do that, and if you're able to operate from your core, you don't need outside motivation all the time to keep you going, because again, it's just who you are. It's you're the apple seed that's growing into this apple tree.
Hi, my name is Tom. I'm the host of the Impact Billionaires. And I started this podcast because I have a life goal of impacting 1 billion people's lives positively. And if you are, just like me, looking to make a dent in this universe, leave a mark, I invite you to subscribe to this podcast. I will bring on guests who have the mindset and capabilities to become, or already are, what I call Impact Billionaires. Together with them, I'll explore in depth what it would take to impact 1 billion people's lives positively. We'll dive in what today's biggest challenges are and how we could go about solving those. What tools and resources we have available that can help with our mission. In short, we'll ask big questions, come up with big ideas so we can have big impact. Episodes air every 2 weeks and are available on all streaming platforms. The Impact Billionaires. What does it take to impact 1 billion people's lives positively?
Welcome to the second episode with an Impact Billionaire. Today I have the absolute pleasure of introducing you to Yonca Braeckman. She's the founder and CEO of Impact Shakers, a global impact ecosystem tackling complex societal challenges through inclusive entrepreneurship. She's a mission-driven entrepreneur and investor in underrepresented founders. I would characterize that as her big life mission. She helped build the Belgian and European tech startup ecosystem, and as a mentor at South by Southwest, Slush Tokyo, General Assembly, Village Capital, Shapers Impact Capital, and startup programs across the globe, she guided many startups on their first steps abroad. She built a new smart city hub in Ghent, Belgium, obviously, with an in-house acceleration program called WAT Factory. She serves on the board of different nonprofits and is the curator of TEDxGhent and the Techstars Startup Digest reading list on Impact Entrepreneurship, of course. Most recently, she initiated the Horasis Young Visionaries for the Global Vision Community Horasis to add to her mission of lifting diverse social entrepreneurs. Yonca is an absolute power lady, and some might even say she invented the word inclusive entrepreneurship. Kidding, of course. Am I, though? She's also one of the 40 under 40, the Belgian initiative to bring together young visionary leaders, and that she is. So without further ado, let's dive into our conversation. You ready? Here we go. All right, Yonca, we're live. Thank you very much for being here.
Are we live?
We are live. Are we not recording?
Oh, really?
No, we're not. We're not live. We're recording, but we are rolling. That's so.
All right.
That's why we're switching to English. And yeah, this is going to be the second episode of the Impact Billionaires. So first of all, thank you very much for being here. Secondly, I will have introduced you as the amazing, mind-blowing human being that you are. You were one of the first people that I spoke about the concept of the Impact Billionaires. And so I remember you having a very distinct reaction when I spoke about the concept of the Impact Billionaire. So I'm curious, when I say the Impact Billionaire, what comes to mind? How do you look at it? What do you see? What do you feel?
Yeah, thanks for inviting me, Tom. Thank you so much for your kind words. Billionaires. Yeah, so the association with billionaires immediately triggers, I don't think billionaires should exist, as in financial billionaires, because I understand your impact billionaires are something completely different. But to me, it triggers a negative connotation of the form of capitalism we ended up in, because I don't necessarily believe that capitalism is a very wrong format of economics. But I do believe that the way we live it and that our economic system has built it today is not maintainable. And the idea that building a business and striving to become a billionaire should be your ultimate goal, trying on the way not to pay taxes as you go, trying to earn extra billions when there is a pandemic, and growing your fortune, which already is ridiculously big, even more, is not something that aligns with my vision of thriving humanity on a thriving planet, to quote Kate Rawford from the Doughnut Economics.
Yeah, and that's something that I think about as well. And I spoke to you about the concept of the impact coin as well, of like looking at different forms of capital in that sense. But I'm curious, what do you think are the key questions we need to be able to answer in order to get to that vision of Doughnut Economics? Because I believe that's the vision you support as well, or would you tweak it a little bit? And maybe can you explain very briefly for the listeners what Doughnut Economics is?
I think it's an economic model framework, highest potential for adoption, because it's not controversial. Everything that's stated in there just makes so much sense. And I cannot imagine anyone opposing that we should strive for a decent life for people on this planet. So the donut consists of two concentric circles, and the inner circle is called the social foundation. And basically, it says that we should strive for all humans to be able to thrive on this planet. And it has 12 different areas which are defined in which there should be minimum levels for people in order to thrive. These are things like housing, energy, but also political voice, social equity. But it doesn't state how we should achieve it. It doesn't have a very specific roadmap. It is a framework that can be adopted by people, by systems that are already in place. And the outer circle is a planetary boundary. And it says, in order for people to thrive on this planet, we should not overshoot our planetary boundaries. I think that makes a lot of sense as well. We need to make sure that we can live on a habitable planet, even though maybe we want to be a space traveling people, but still, let's not ruin the planet we're on already.
No, yeah, I agree. And so you say it doesn't speak about the how, right? And so that's for entrepreneurs like us to think about. To jump on that is, I think I have a belief where I think a lot of our issues come from the system that we design around. So I think the Doughnut Economics is a good model. It's a nice outcome. But how do we create the system that has that outcome? And so I have a couple of ideas about that, but I'm curious, what do you think? And that comes back to my first question is, what do you think are the key questions we need to be able to answer? What system should we look at in order to get that outcome?
That is a very big question. And I think I want to go back to my role in there rather, and how I see my role and my contribution to these questions, because asking the right questions is the beginning of everything. And there is some type of framework already in the Doughnut, which does talk about the how, which is regenerative by design and distributive by design, but still it is about how we're going to apply it. And what I'm interested in is how we're going to apply it to businesses. My passion is how to use entrepreneurship as a vehicle for change. I think all stakeholders in society should contribute, but I found the part where I believe that I can contribute the most is entrepreneurship right now, because it is such an agile vehicle. It gives you so much liberty to build something, change things, change how you're building it while you're building it, but also grow exponentially and have an exponential impact. So that's what we're focusing on with Impact Shakers, on how to make the shift on using entrepreneurship not only as a means to grow our fortunes, but also to, while we do that, because we absolutely believe that profit is okay and should be a part of building a business, but how you do that while creating as much impact as you can. And how we approach it is in a systemic way, because we believe the shift is a systemic shift. And that's why we're building different blocks, of which how businesses are financed is a very important one. And legal structures will be another very important piece in there as well, and room for experiment within these. So what we have now is our community. We have an online community for impact entrepreneurs, which is just a place where people can connect, but it's always important to have a space. We started with real life events, but yeah, one day. And then we have an educational piece where our flagship program is Raise Alternative Funding for Your Impact Business, which is in collaboration with Atmos and with Zebras Unite. So the Zebras are basically my idols. For those of you who haven't read anything by or about the Zebra movement, they started, I think, over 5 years ago in the US in Portland. 4 women started by writing this manifesto, which put a new type of business as opposed to unicorns, where your goal is to build $1 billion business. Your goal is to build a sustainable business as a zebra. It is to do it in collaboration. It is not to build a business where the concept is winner takes all. It is about how you see the ending of your business. Is it something you build to sell to someone, to sell to a bigger company, or is it something you build to give to your community? And it doesn't necessarily make the choice, but it gives a much broader spectrum. And in this, how you finance your business it's often overlooked how big the impact is of the decision you make very early on in building your business. And by offering a much broader spectrum of financing instruments, you can help different types of people to build different types of businesses for different solutions. Which is also why we want to experiment with a new investment vehicle, and we want to hack basically an existing legal structure for this cooperative. This is in Belgium. We have been doing research together with a law firm on how to use a cooperative as an investment vehicle, where we would also work on who is the investor and get many different types of people to become small investors in this micro financing fund. And we would go invest in 6 to 8 companies with this first version of the instrument, and go and work on so it's a complete experiment. It uses a different legal structure, it uses different investors, and the way you invest into the companies is also different. It's not an equity investment, so it means you don't necessarily take a share of a company, because once you take equity of a company, it means you want this company to be sold one day. Mm-hmm. But what if you invest with revenue-based financing, which is becoming a new hot thing, and you basically invest or loan money based on future revenue? It means that whoever is building the company keeps much more ownership of the choice of future choices of what to do and how to build a business.
My question there, I think I have a couple of questions that arise there. Is first, maybe the one that comes directly onto what you're saying is, if the ownership lies a lot more with the person that eventually builds the company, aren't they also going to be the ones that are going to profit a lot more? And isn't that the whole shift that we're trying to go away from? Or how does that work? How does the company retain value, or how is it valued? Is it, because to frame the whole thing that I'm saying, to give more context, is I am looking, like, I dream of a way where companies are not valued by the monetary value they create, or not only as a proxy, but are almost directly measured on the impact they create. The problem with that is that measuring impact is hard. Like, you have direct impact, indirect impact, there's direct consequences, indirect consequences. Companies and certain entities that have a certain cash flow that flow through them, and then there's a valuation and investment and equity. That's an easy system to understand in the sense of what this company's worth, what you're going to be able to do with that money. Is this an answer to that problem, or is this an answer to a different sort of problem?
I think it's an answer to a different type of problem. It is rather an answer to all of the businesses that are not a good match with venture capital, because venture capital has become, as it seems to be, the only way to finance a business, while it never has been. It's also about uncovering and showing the world again that there are so many more instruments. And because it's clear the numbers in venture capital money all goes to the same types of businesses and the same types of people. So there is clearly a mismatch. Yeah, jump in.
No, yeah, I think so. I think the two big problems that you're tackling on is, first of all, there's just, it's spillage, right? You just give money and you hope that you give money to 1,000 companies and you hope that one becomes a unicorn and that pays all the rest. There's a lot of social, environmental, human capital is being wasted. So I think that's a big problem. But I think that the second one, I think that's maybe the one that you're very passionate about, is that venture capital is very, probably if you're white and male, the chances of you getting venture capital are way bigger than if you're a female that is trying to make it in that same space, just to give an example. But there's other minority groups. How are those different tools that you speak about opening that space up?
So that's it. It's clear that there is one type of founder, one type of business that's being built with a certain goal in a race that fits venture capital very well. And there are multiple causes for that. And one of them is, of course, that people invest in what they know. And so they invest in people that look like them. It's the typical bias story and things they understand, which none of it has to do with malice. It is a system, and the system perpetuates itself. So that is one part. But the other part might also be that a lot of people don't want to build this type of business. But the only well-known financing instrument in this whole startup sphere right now is venture capital. So our role is also a lot in the informing part, because revenue-based financing is quite new or becoming more popular in this type of startup investment. But the other things, they're not new. There are things like grants, government grants, tax benefits. There are things like participating in a challenge and winning prize money there, a bank loan, getting other types of debt. It's part of it is informing, and the other part is really opening up money for a new group of people indeed.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So a question going slightly like still within that space, but going away from that in the sense of, why do you care? Like, why do you even want to have an impact? Why do you even ask yourself these questions? Why do you choose to go in that direction? Why do you care?
Good question. It's a question I ask myself sometimes, but I don't know how to do otherwise. It's part of me wanting to change and challenge things. It's always been a part. Whichever job or mission I embarked on, it is basically challenging the status quo. And I'm always stuck in this dilemma between, do I really want to make a systemic change and fight to change things at a higher level? Or do I just want to impact one life? And I think it's a struggle a lot of people have that have this drive to change things they find unjust. And right now I'm still trying the higher level, but I bet someday I will be like, I'll just go and help 3 people and that'll be it. But my drive, the thing that drives me crazy is injustice. And it's always been the case ever since I was a child that I speak up, and that it is part of my character, clearly, to get involved in things that are not my business and go and speak up and suffer consequences sometimes for that. But my life has also always made me a bit of an outsider in many ways. I fit in socially, but on the other hand, my path hasn't been a very conventional one. So I know a lot of injustice from up close, very up close. So it means it's often the case that people who have encountered certain issues, really have a big drive to make sure that other people don't have to encounter the same problems.
Do you want to maybe elaborate a little bit on your story? What are some key moments where you were like, okay, this really defined me?
That would be a very long story.
Okay. No, you don't have to.
One day I'll make a movie. There are already plans for a part of my teenage years where...
I like that ambition. We're going to look back when you're like this huge impact entrepreneur. They're going to make a movie about your life, and we're all going to go watch it.
Yeah, there were some definite interesting forming years in my teenage years. And one of the very cool things about that is that one of my friends from back then, Anais, was one of my best friends when I was about 13, and she joined Impact Shakers as a marketing manager now, and I'm sure we'll our story in an article one day. But to start with, I was born, my father is a Turkish immigrant. He came to Belgium in the 70s, late 70s. So I am one of the first children in Ghent to be born out of a Turkish-Belgian relationship. Not a very successful one, but I grew up with my mom, just me and my mom for the largest part. And yeah, many more things followed.
Yeah, I can imagine. I'm curious though, because I think I want to jump back a little bit to the thing that you said about like high level and low level, because this is a struggle that I obviously also have. And I think, like you say, a lot of people, especially the internet generation that grew up with seeing like people like Mark Zuckerberg, for whatever he created, good or bad, we'll leave that in between. But literally, like, it started from a bedroom, and he's literally shaping the world from starting from his bedroom. And I think that puts a lot of pressure on those people wanting to have an impact on this world and seeing like, wow, that's the level that we need to be thinking at. And obviously, I believe there's a lot of power in just reasoning at that scale level, because I believe that if you ask the question of, okay, how can I impact 1 billion people's lives positively? You're going to start thinking about different things than if you would about, okay, how can I make my roommate who's sitting downstairs happy? I can make him a pizza and he's going to be very happy. But then the thinking is different. So how do you keep yourself in a mind space, or what questions or what things do you use to keep that drive alive, and how do you think at that scale?
I consume massive amounts of information. I read a lot of different types of sources as well. So I read a lot of new economic thinking, but also more specifically than on the financing part. And on the other hand, I talk to a lot of people as well. Ever since I started in the startup world, I've had the privilege to work with so many entrepreneurs. So to understand how you build a business, I think I learned mostly by engaging with people who are building businesses. And out of so many conversations I had, I also had the privilege to travel and to learn from entrepreneurs and people supporting entrepreneurs across the world. So I think for me, a lot of it comes through processing information from different types of sources, and my brain is wired to think at a higher level. It's just something I'm good at. I can see a bigger picture easily. But on the other hand, when sometimes people ask you, what is the thing you're most proud of, or what is your biggest accomplishment? And if I think about those things, I think of people. I think of a person whose life I impacted. I don't think of some policy that I tried to push or a program I organized. I think about a person. So I love thinking about how can we change the system. But when I think about what gives you the warmest feeling, it is this one person you have an impact on. So that is why I think it's very hard sometimes to keep motivated, because the fight you're fighting is not you don't have this direct link with your achievements. With what we do try that. That is also, we have these different pillars, And in some of them, we do impact people directly. And I think that helps to keep motivation, because in anything you do, and especially if you want to change things, you're fighting it. Your victories are not always very remarkable.
I think that's very profound what you're saying. And I think that is, when you're thinking about impacting 1 billion people's lives, that's a huge piece of it, because for so long, you're not even going to know how many people you impact, whatever you start. And so that's why I think that the whole concept of trying to impact 1 billion people's lives will always remain a concept. You're never going to know whether you impacted 1 billion people's lives. The only thing we can do is try to think at that scale and try to understand how we can create that warm, fuzzy feeling for like billions of people between each other. But in the end, it's not going to be able to be directly linked to you in that sense. So I think that's such a profound thing on which you just touched upon. And I'm thinking for myself in the same sense as well, as what keeps me driven or what keeps me motivated in trying to like get up every morning and work on things that you think are important. And it's true, it's hard to, it's like an answer of, it's just who you are, right? There's like I don't know if you have that as well, but I have like fire in my belly more every time I think about stuff. Like maybe it's something like that as well for you.
The thing that makes it easier is the more it aligns with who you are in general, the easier it is to keep going, because it is for, even if you're working on the best cause in the world and helping 1 billion people, I'm sure everyone wakes up some days and is like, why am I doing this? And then I think the link to working directly with people and maybe trying to keep that link in there as well makes a lot of sense. I think it's why people like Richard Branson organize programs in which they work directly with an entrepreneur to enable them to keep a connection with humanity.
No, but it's, yeah.
My ideas on life-work balance they're not a thing, I think. I don't believe you're different people when you wake up and go to work. I think you're the same person. You might adjust your language a bit and tone it down, or adjust some things about you a little
Wear
bit.
Pants.
Not anymore. But you're still the same person. And I think that is why so many people are unhappy in their jobs, because it's not aligning with who they are.
I think that's, again, you're spitting truths after truths, but I think how did you realize, or how did you define or come to know the person that you are? Because I think so many people struggle with arriving to a point where they feel aligned. What do you do? How do you do that?
Lots of struggles early on in life. They help. Yeah.
But helps. Is that sure? What in the end, the struggles, they come to you, but it's about how you deal with them. Is there, like, how did you look at those?
I think a lot of it is how I'm raised by my mom. I am raised to be me, and not to have. I'm also raised in a very atypical Belgian way, I have no guilt. I was not raised with any type of guilt or judgment or need to be someone. There was never pressure on me to go to or anything. It's very intrinsic. I was taught to be very kind always. And I don't know, I've always attracted people around me as well who share their stories. Empathy as one of the keys, learning who you are by listening to others. And yeah, it's one of the keys in my life is also giving up, not being afraid to give up on things, which is one of the advantages that come with no guilt, because it's in a country like ours, it's very hard sometimes to give up and allow yourself to discover something new, something that might match you better. But yeah, basically everything I did before Impact Shakers, I gave up each time to enable a new thing to enter.
Yeah, I think for everybody listening, if you just replace like Yoncha's mom with our own thoughts towards ourselves, then you've got so many keys to letting yourself be who you are. I think in the end, an apple tree seed doesn't need anything either to become an apple tree. And so I think the things that you spoke about, how many times do we like not guilt trip ourselves on things? Like it's just in our own thoughts. We don't even need a mom or an upbringing to do this to us, or judgment. We keep judging ourselves and our thoughts, and we keep taking these judgments of other people so at heart. And I think these are all obstacles to just finding and really being in alignment with yourself. So I think in the end, it's so awesome. First of all, like your mom sounds awesome. I definitely want to meet her one day. But secondly, like I think those are key things in really seeking your alignment. And what you say about giving up, I think a lot is about the words that you use, because one of the key beliefs that I hold as well is that failure doesn't exist. Like you can't fail. You can either learn or continue. And even while you're continuing, you're learning. But I think those are.
Yeah, it's interesting that I use the word giving up, because that's not really how I see it in my own mind, but it's rather how I notice a lot of people see it for themselves. Because I have so many friends and people I talk to that are like, oh, you're doing such great work, and it must be so nice to work on something so positive. And I have a job, I'm too scared to leave. I would love to have a job with purpose, but it's a good place. It's the golden cage, and it's moving on. It's just as hard as a breakup. It's breaking up with a part of you, mostly with a part of you, I assume.
And so would you say you're so good at that? No, but I mean, I guess you really are. You are good at just in that sense of like creative destruction, right? Like destroying a part of what you were before to become something different. What would you say to those people that are in those golden cages that actually know that they're not aligned? Like what's the first step they could take, you think?
Yeah. So what I often say is that I don't think I've met anyone who has regretted it when they left and made a different choice. I think change is rarely bad. I think almost all people are happier by going through change than by staying in a situation. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I also try to like train my own mind to like whenever I'm in a situation, I'm like constantly thinking like change is good, change is good, change is good. I'm like just telling myself those things. And also I think to add on to that is I think I try to also relinquish my attachment to outcome by trying to fail at something every day. And so I try
very hard on yourself.
But the failing again, like it doesn't really exist for me. So what I'm saying is I'm just trying to, for example, like to contact a prime minister or whatever. And like, okay, there's also like other things that you can do in that sense to detach from outcome and focus on process.
But still, that's pushing a boundary a day.
Yeah, I'm really trying to do. I'm currently at 1 a week, to be very honest with you.
Okay, that's better.
But the idea is 1 a day. So
because high expectations on yourself, that's you were talking about being hard on yourself. Yeah. And I think so. I was still born in the 80s. I think I'm the last generation who's like able to take it a bit easy. And although seeing people around you that become millionaires before they're 30, it's a bit frustrating, but still, I don't think it's as frustrating for me as it is for you. And I had a cassette player. I didn't have the internet, or it's a really different level of expectations that were put upon us growing up as it is for you.
For sure. I would definitely agree. I think there is a whole lot of pressure from this window on the world being wide open and the statistical anomalies being taken for the standard, whether it be all the girls and guys on Instagram that are being photoshopped and being portrayed as the vision of beauty, to exactly what you're saying, right? There's every single day I see a clip of a 22-year-old being interviewed as the new millionaire that started this business or that business, like this. Like there is that extra mental pressure that you're taking on. And to me, I think it, like if you'd asked me like 2-3 years ago, I was like, I have to go. But I think what really brought me peace is the fact that I'm working towards impact instead of, you know, that monetary thing. Like I think the monetary will follow if I find the right things of impact. And I think I look at that mechanism as if you build useful things, you'll be rewarded for them one way or another. But the focus for me really shifted from the how question to the what question, and getting to the what through a how. If you know what I'm probably not making a lot of sense, but by focusing on the what and the why and letting the how unfold itself, that took off a lot of pressure, because I feel like, especially when you're chasing numbers, because that's what it is in the end. You're your first million, you want your second million, and it never freaking ends. But yeah, I do agree that pressure is there, but that's why I believe so much in enabling the shift from, I think the impact offers a space where everybody can create that utility feeling for themselves, because I think in the end, that's what it comes down to, is we're all trying to be useful members of society one way or another. And today monetary is seen as that benchmark for that. But, you know, how useful is, I'm sorry for all the stockbrokers listening, but how useful is it what you're doing with day trading? Like you're not working on allocating financial equity in a good way. So yeah, there's a lot of work to be done.
The secret to happiness basically is helping others and being grateful. It's not that complicated. And helping others every day is just an selfish motivation, because it makes you happy. But what you were saying about building businesses that are focused on impact, the tricky part there is that it's hard to build a business which focuses on both of them, on impact and profit. And that is where we want to come in, and we want to build solid models and methods to help people build these type of businesses, because it's not easy to build it on the side while you're doing your job. It's not as easy to create revenue from the start, which is what we're noticing as well. And we've been trying really hard to get sustainable revenue in the company, but it's not easy to grow it as fast as you would. I am convinced as well that the money will follow, but you need to find the space and time to get to that point. And that's one of the trickiest parts.
Yeah, I think it's that, or there needs to be a system shift, but like a genuine system shift. I think our current monetary system is just focused on financial capital. There is no, like literally, like countries are sometimes incentivized to cut down entire forests, and then they can sell the wood and that will boost their GDP, and now they're doing good. But heck no, they're not doing good. And that is just the outcome of the system that we're producing. So I think, again, if we take a billion impact perspective, we need to look at, is there a different currency that we can create that can, you know, take those things into account, where you could be making money and could be getting revenue just by the fact of the impact that you're creating. And I do think there are a lot of spaces there and a lot of possibilities. And again, like I spoke earlier about the concept of the impact coin, and I think the whole crypto sphere in and of itself allows us to completely rethink our monetary systems. And so I think there is a very exciting space that I'm personally also like looking into. So I think, as you're saying, like you could either optimize within the current system and try to figure out ways to work that. But I think at the same time, we need to be coming up with ideas to say, look, this old system isn't working for us anymore. We're literally completely destroying our planet. We need to figure out something else that also works for everybody and creates the same incentive structure, because we do want to keep, you know, innovating, and we do want to keep creating new services and all those things. And I think capitalism is great at that. But yeah, how do you?
So that is the motivation right there. I get to meet people like you every week. And I see a very positive change as into how many great minds are working on new ideas. And I think it's inevitable that we're moving into a good direction.
Yeah, I think so too. I think 98% of the world is good, and they're all working on some of these things. Yeah, no, I agree. All right, I have another question for you. What is something that you believe that few people agree with you on? As they say, it could be there's not really a thing, but
I don't know. Business-wise, I can't think of anything just like this on the spot.
no, it is a hard question,
Yeah.
but it is an interesting one to think about. So if anything, just try to, if you do something with it. I think one of the things that is maybe a thing is that I think you do really believe that creating impact is a super viable way of making a living in the end.
Yeah. You think few people agree on that? Yeah, maybe I'm in a bubble.
Maybe not. Maybe it's not that few, but I just think there are a lot of people, maybe even people that are listening here on the podcast that think, yeah, it's really cool to have impact. And I'd love to have impact on 1 billion people. They've been in the end, I need to put food on the table. And yeah, I feel like sometimes people feel like they're juxtaposed, but they're really like, I think if you look at, for example, an Elon Musk, in my mind, again, also controversial, but in my mind, what he's doing, for example, with Tesla is a huge impact for a sustainable future.
And what are we going to do with the batteries?
Yeah, that's a good question. But we can, there's definitely ways that
maybe this is a controversial opinion of mine. What are we going to do with all of the batteries of all of the electric cars?
I think you can recycle them, right? They don't go into the air as CO2.
I don't think we can recycle all of the toxic wastes they produce, but
okay. I don't know enough about it to really go into that. But okay, anyway, we'll take that. We'll write that down as your controversial opinion. Another question is, what is your biggest failure? Or I don't know, you don't necessarily see things as failure, but what is one of the biggest points of failure, and what have you learned from it in this impact journey?
That's the thing. I really don't look at things as failures. I remember getting this question on one of my first job interviews, and
Nice.
I couldn't think of the largest obstacle or problem I solved, and the only thing I could think of was having a car break down somewhere very dangerous. That was a real problem. But other than that, I don't know, we shift gears so quickly as well. Like right now we launched Impact Awards. You can apply until May 21st for the Impact Shakers Awards based on the Doughnut Economics model on the Social Foundation. And I came up with the idea Christmas holidays, and we started building it 6 weeks ago, I think. 6 or 7 weeks ago, we started putting the material together. And after 3 weeks, so let's say 4 weeks ago, we were ready to start fundraising, because my idea was to find someone to sponsor each award, to finance a prize for the participating companies, and to finance us a bit. Failed. So we're taking a different approach, but that also means we gave it 3 to 4 weeks to try. So we shift gears really quickly, as into, I call this a failed experiment, and now we're changing it. We're going to take a different approach. We're going to try to find one bigger partner, probably only for the next edition. We're going to try to come up with maybe an ecosystem solution for this.
Yeah, I think that's actually an even more insightful answer, and that I think is core to a lot of great entrepreneurs, in the sense is that the way you look at failure is exactly the way you just described.
Part of the process.
It's just, exactly part of the process, and it's something that kind of almost fuels your iteration and fuels, okay, this doesn't work, let's freaking go to the next.
So we have, of course, raise alternative funding for your impact business. And the first cohort, the result of one of the participating companies was that they stopped their business after 2 coaching sessions with me. Is that a failure? I don't know.
Exactly.
I think it's a big success, because, I think it was clearly the better decision there. And it was almost as if I gave some type of permission to let go. Again, that letting go. Yeah.
No, yeah, I think exactly. And that again, for me, is always a core question if you're trying to have impact is first question is from what perspective are you looking? Like what is your reference frame? And then second, like what is the actual thing you're doing? And I think one of the things that you just said as well, I think a core thing is just do things. I had also applied to be one of the 40 under 40. And so I did not get selected as one of the last ones. So for me, that was also like a moment of, okay, I failed at this attempt. By the way, for listeners, Yonca did get selected, very rightfully so, and that's freaking awesome. But to me, then again, like I emailed them asking them for feedback and being like, hey, like what can I do to become part of this community and to scale the impact that I'm trying to have? Because that's really how I looked at that community as well. And they said something that I already really know. And I guess that's also one of the reasons that I'm doing this impact thing is just do things. Like, I guess I'm still very young, opposed to somebody that's 39. They've had more time to do things. But in the end, I know this, like it comes down to, it's really good to have all these ideas and you can have all these visions and they're important to drive you forward. But in the end, it comes down to try stuff, start, do it. And that's what you just said. You had the idea for the Impact Shaker Awards. You're not starting to write 5 business plans and calling them and being like, hey, is this a good idea? What do you think? You're just like, no, we're trying it.
We have 40 ecosystem partners joining in, which is the part that makes me happiest about this particular project. It's the first time. Yeah, it's the first time I think that so many impact ecosystem players are rallying behind one thing. And my entire mindset is collaborative, and I am so happy to see that we found something that people can see as a collaboration instead of a competitive project. And we have impact accelerators, impact investors joining, and I hope to get to 50 for this first edition. And the first one is in Europe, but next one will be Southeast Asia or Africa, and we'll make it a global thing because everything we do is also global. And it's so nice to be connected to some entrepreneur in Cambodia. And so yesterday we had the last session of our second cohort, and it had people from Cambodia, a bunch from Europe, but also Portland in the US. Then so we spanned the entire globe in one session of people helping each other out. That's awesome. What keeps me going.
Yeah, that I can imagine. I can imagine. All right, maybe a pretty fundamental question as we're nearing the end of this podcast is, how do you look at impact? What is impact for you?
Yeah, maybe this is also controversial. I don't know how much I like impact measurement. I have an impact investor friend, and he put it to me one day. I don't remember the person of the quote, but it's a judge from the higher Supreme Court in the US who had to make a judgment about porn. And he said, it's hard to describe or define porn, but I know it when I see it.
Okay, yeah.
So I think having positive impact is something with, and I do believe that we should apply frameworks. It's also why we're trying out now for the first time with the Doughnut framework, but it's also why we chose that one, because the idea is, okay, are you working towards giving people a political voice? Is that the impact you are achieving? And one of the things in our projects, any type of project we develop, the part we focus on the most is understanding the problem, because there is often a mismatch of building a solution that is not an actual solution for the problem. But if you have a very solid understanding of the problem, the impact you will make will also be an impact on this particular problem. And it's more about going back to this every time while you're developing your product or your service to figure out your impact, and then trying to figure out which numbers work. If you're developing a new medical solution, it will be easier. If you cure people, you can count the people you cure. But there are many more complex solutions that work at different levels, like you say. And I think focusing, but that's also part of my doership, focusing too much on how we're going to measure what I'm doing only takes away from trying out different things and making sure it's actually working.
I couldn't agree with you more, but because I really do agree. And I think the shift that we're seeing towards a more, I feel like abundance-based economy where, where there's a lot more, that's why it's also, I think, so important to strive towards equality, because I think numbers are there also to prove something and to be like, look, I did this, look, I made something. And so if we just assume that everybody has equal equal opportunities and has an equal voice and has those things, then you don't necessarily need to prove anything anymore. But I think numbers do provide that, and they provide very succinct feedback on whether what you're doing is the best way of doing it.
I absolutely believe we should use numbers. My only question is when and how much do you focus on the numbers? It's a matter of every project. You get funding for something and you notice that the KPIs you agreed upon are not the actual KPIs that you need. How much do you stick to them? And for example, for us, we've been around now for 2 years and a bit. Mm-hmm. And it's only at the end of this year that we published a year report with very concrete numbers and also goals. We have numerical goals now of how many businesses we're going to help, how much money we want to raise. But that was a very hard thing to do in the beginning because building all of these pieces, and I just think it should get the right level of attention.
And the right level is up to the founders and the people driving.
And if you want someone's money, it will be also up to the people whose money you're taking. That's also a part of the deal, right? When you're talking to investors or governments to help you build this solution, then there will be different requirements. But being creative about how you think about your impact and how you're measuring it, I think is a key. And on the side of the people granting investment, I think it's very important that they remain flexible and focused on the actual goal and on the actual problem they're solving rather than sticking to some type of metric that has been agreed upon at some point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fall in love with the problem is a big one there. All right. Yeah, we're nearing the end of our podcast, but I have a couple of questions left. Yeah. Starting with, if you were in my shoes, is there a question that I didn't ask you that you wish I asked you?
No,
not
immediately.
Great. Then I guess well done me. So another question is like, where can listeners connect to you? Is that through Impact Shakers? Do they send you an email?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. I am active on LinkedIn. We don't have Facebook or any of the other social media. We have the website Impact Shakers, and now we also have Impact Shakers Awards. Do apply if you're under 5 years old. And
under 5 years old? As a company?
As a company.
All right, then a couple of quick fire questions, so you don't need to go super deep into these ones, but what do you do to help yourself think big, in between brackets, impact?
Yeah, as I said, reading massive amounts.
And so what advice would you give to people that are looking to have an impact?
Surround yourself with people with the same mindset, but not necessarily the same opinion.
Brilliant. And what do you think it takes to become an impact billionaire?
A lot of heart with a T and a lot of hard work. Because working hard actually does something. And we have a manifesto on our website as well. And one of the secrets I've uncovered is a very simple one. It is do what you say you're gonna do. And that means in working with anybody, it is rare. And I didn't know that was a rare thing, but apparently it is.
I agree. Such a big one. And I think on what you're saying, the working hard part is, I saw this visual once where it was like a timeline showing I'm not going to be able to explain the visual because it's a visual, but the idea is just that the hard thing about impact as well is that your feedback on whether the hard work you're putting in is super delayed. Like it's 90% hard work and then all of a sudden it's an overnight success. And I think a key thing there is just what you said is one, sticking true to what you say you're going to do, which to me ties into aligning with who you are and speaking your truth, but acting your truth and all those things. And I think if you're able to do that, and if you're able to operate from your core, you don't need outside motivation all the time to keep you going, because again, it's just who you are. It's you're the apple seed that's growing into this apple tree. And
yeah, I think the surrounding yourself with people who share your values is a very important part of that as well. I have been so lucky and I feel very privileged, the people that I get to work with, that I get to know, and it's fantastic. If you're maybe at a lower point at some point, then somebody else will be higher. And if you go there alone, go fast, go together.
Go far. Absolutely. And by the way, you can join the Impact Shakers or apply to join. Same with our community. Like we're always trying to bring together like-minded people to exactly. That's also one of the big reasons that I started the Impact Billionaires is it got me talking to you. And it got me like meeting all exactly. And I think it's so core to find your tribe and connect with your tribe. And I think that's a very good one. And I think with that incredibly good advice, we're going to end this podcast. And I want to say first of all, did you enjoy it? Did you have fun?
Yeah. I think it was a very deep conversation, and it's the most open conversation I've had on the subject, and including me. So thank you, Tom. You make people feel comfortable, and I wish you all the best with the Impact Billionaires.
We're doing this together. Whether you like it or not. I'm not going to be able to impact 1 billion people alone. Like you're part of it now. Sorry.
I'll gladly be so.
Awesome. Yonca, thank you so much. And until next time.
Bye.
Bye.